So let's start with a quiz. How many women can you name from the Old Testament? Now, how many women do you think are named in the Old Testament? Only you know the answer to the first one, and apparently the answer to the second one is a bit a matter of interpretation as well, but I'm going to go with Will Gaffney. She's my favorite Old Testament scholar right now. She says there are 111 women named in the Old Testament. Some people have it higher than that, but we'll go with 111. Now, less than 10%, or to be exact, 10 of those women from the Old Testament who are named make it into the lectionary cycles over a period of 3 years. I got to tell you, if you didn't know that, you're in good company, because I've been doing this for a minute, and I did not know that until I began working on this sermon. The lectionary text only give the names of 10 women over the entire 3-year cycle. Why? Maybe because some of those lectionary or biblical texts, not lectionary texts, but biblical texts are problematic. Maybe it makes Abraham look bad if you read of him abandoning Sarah to an Egyptian harem in order to save his own life. Maybe because there are so many rape stories. Dinah, the Levite's concubine, Michal's treatment by her father, the woman who was cut into many pieces, the rape of Tamar by her brother. They are all problematic, all right. Sometimes they're called the texts of terror. They describe sexual exploitation and violence that was pervasive then and now. I don't think, however, that it's because the lectionary committee wanted to shield us from violence. Remember when John the Baptist got his head chopped off and put on a platter at a banquet? Huh, that's kind of violent. It's in our children's Bibles. How about the gruesome story of a man hanging to his death on a cross and being stabbed in the side? That's the central story of the Christian faith. But violence against women, shh. Incest, shh. Rape, shh. It's in the Bible. In the selected lectionary text, there is a pattern of silencing women's suffering. And so today I go into non-lectionary land for the reading of the Rape of Tamar. In 2 Samuel 13, verses 2 through 20, I'm going to provide a bit of commentary, perhaps, as we go. We will begin with noting that David's son, Amnon, fell in love with his sister Tamar. Amnon was so tormented that he made himself ill because of his sister Tamar, for she was a virgin, and it seemed impossible to Amnon to do anything to her. But Amnon had a friend whose name was Jonadab, the son of David's brother, and Jonadab was a very crafty man. I'm thinking this may run in the family. He said to him, "O son of the king," this is David's son, of course, "why are you so haggard morning after morning?" Some translations say depressed, and earlier some translations say that he was obsessed with Tamar. That seems like a pretty good word choice. But here he says, "I love Tamar." He's delusional. My brother Absalom's sister Jonadab said to him, "Lie down on your bed and pretend to be ill. When your father comes to see you, say to him, 'Let my sister Tamar come and give me something to eat and prepare food in my sight, so that I may see it and eat from her hand. How weird is this guy? So Amnon lay down and pretended to be ill. And when the king came to see him, Amnon said, "Please, let my sister Tamar come and make a couple of cakes in my sight, so that I may eat from her hand." Then David sent home to Tamar, saying, "Go to your brother Amnon's house and prepare food to him." Tamar had no choice. She was told what to do by her dad, by the king. So Tamar went to her brother Amnon's house where he was lying down. She took the dough, kneaded it, made cakes in his sight, and baked the cakes. Then she took the pan and set them out before him, but he refused to eat. Amnon said, everyone get away." And then Amnon said to Tamar, "Bring the food into the chamber," that would be the bedroom, "so that I may eat from your hand." So Tamar took the cakes she had made and brought them to the chamber to Amnon her brother. But when she brought them near to him to eat, he took hold of her and said, "Come lie with me, my sister." She answered him, "No, my brother. Do not force me to do such a thing. Such a thing is not done in Israel. Do not do anything so vile. For as for me, where can I carry my shame? And as for you, you would be one of the scoundrels of Israel. I beg you, speak to the king, for he will not withhold me from you." But he would not listen to her, and being stronger than she, he forced her and lay with her. Then Amnon was seized with a great loathing for her. Indeed, his loathing was even greater than his lust that he had felt for her. And Amnon said to her, "Get out." She said to him, "No, my brother, for this wrong in sending me away is even greater than what you just did to me." But he would not listen to her. He called the young man who served him and said, "Put this woman out of my presence and bolt the door after her." Now she was wearing a long robe with sleeves, for this is how the virgin daughters of the king were clothed in earlier times. So his servant put her out and bolted the door after her, but Tamar put ashes on her head and tore the long robe that she was wearing. She put her hand on her head and went away, crying out loud as she went away. The story does not end there. There are desolate women, survivors, and victims in every town and every church in 2022. The rape of Tamar does not begin in this chapter. Just 2 chapters earlier, 2 Samuel 11, is the story of David kidnapping Bathsheba. It is one of the best-known stories in the Bible, and it's in the children's Bibles. When I was in Sunday school, it was portrayed as a romance. David looks out a window and sees a woman, so he sends his soldiers to get her against her will. This story has nothing to do with love or romance. Then David murdered her righteous husband, Uriah. And as I would write the words on my manuscript for this sermon, I found myself literally writing, "Ah!" at the end of several paragraphs. Who was watching King David? Those years earlier, I can tell you who was watching King David. His sons were watching him. And I don't mean literally, but they grew up in a home where David got what David wanted. The family demons were passed on. Tamar's final act of resistance is when she tears her robe and puts ashes on her head and cries out. It's a mourning script, but it's also a prophetic one. The prophets of Israel did exactly that in the face of injustice. They tore their clothes, they put on ashes, and they cried out. She makes sure that everyone in the palace is going to hear her. A scene that any activist would admire. Listen to me scream. Demons are rampant in the house of David, and the demons of sexual assault, abuse, and rape have been let loose everywhere on our planet and in our churches. And still, victims are routinely ignored by Christians who do not believe women's stories and fail to bring the perpetrators to justice. All too often, churches have been complicit in protecting abusers and pastors and priests and youth ministers and teachers, reinforcing patriarchal power and creating cultures of secrecy, shame, and silence. I just discovered this book this week. It's supposed to come to my house today. It'll be really handy for working on this sermon. But some of you might want to borrow it. It's written by a Presbyterian pastor and survivor, Ruth Everhart, just last year. And it's about the prevalence of sexual abuse in our churches. Sadly, it often takes a murder to get a story told. How many of you know the name of Eliza Fletcher? Is that a name that you remember from the news a couple of months ago? She was the young teacher and mother and marathon runner who was abducted and murdered near the university in Memphis, Tennessee. The day she went missing, her Presbyterian church gathered on a Thursday morning and sang the hymn that we're going to sing later today, "Dear Refuge of My Weary Soul," as they went looking for her. We will sing it in memory of her and all of the other hers in a bit. Now, some of you, I saw your faces. You did know the name Eliza Fletcher. How about Alicia Franklin? Do you know the name Alicia Franklin? Eliza, September 2022 in Memphis. Alicia Franklin, September 2021 in Memphis. Alicia Franklin reported having been attacked and raped to the Memphis police. The rape kit produced her attacker's DNA. They matched that DNA to the man who killed Eliza Fletcher 6 days after Eliza was killed. Over a year later. They could have gotten him off the streets. Alicia Franklin is filing a lawsuit, and she says, "I was just an average black girl, you know? I just think I wasn't a priority." Nobody listened to Alicia Franklin. She wasn't murdered. And even had she been murdered, would she have gotten the attention that Eliza Fletcher received? How many times are victims not the priority? Alicia Franklin did everything right, and she had the evidence. But you know, over 90% of the time, the abuse is not at the hands of a stranger, but an intimate partner. How many of you know the name of Gabby Petito, who was killed by her fiance as they were traveling cross country in those adorable Instagram posts and the cute minivan? She too could have been saved. You know, campers called 911 in Moab after seeing the guy slap Gabby, lock her out of the van and drive away. Later, when the police arrived, the body cam footage shows a crying Gabby, but she blames herself for him hitting her. She says, yes, he did, but it's probably my fault. Now here's the kicker, folks. You can watch this on the body cam. They put him in a hotel for the night in Moab. They have her stay alone in her van, and as the officers walk away, they shake his hand. Do not be deceived by the happy social media post. Gabby was found strangled a few weeks later, and this month, Gabby's parents have given $100,000 to National Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Gabby, Eliza, and on the list goes, were murdered, and as a culture, we seem to think that murder is still a problem. But violence against women, well, it's complicated. Will Georgia elect Walker to the Senate, a man who had a restraining order against him by one of his ex-wives for putting a gun to her head? He was also arrested for stalking a Dallas Cowboys cheerleader. Those things were documented over a decade ago. But would that keep anybody from running for senator? Of course not. And then this week, how many of you saw the video of the guy in Michigan who's running for judge? Did any of you see that video? Unbelievable. Somebody was recording the scene of this well-known man running for judge whipping his girlfriend violently through a window, and it was being videotaped outside the window. He had domestic violence charges filed against him in earlier marriages as well, and the woman he was whipping that was caught this week comes from a history of violence in relationships as well. It is such a vicious cycle. This guy is running for judge still, although he's been charged last week with domestic assault. He posted a $500 bond on Thursday and asked the judge to please lift that no contact order with his girlfriend because he needs her to help him campaign. Someone on the streets of Michigan said to the reporter, "Should one mistake ruin your life? I don't think so. The last time I checked, it takes two to tango." Watch the video. Let's break the silence. Progressive churches have worked really hard to stand against racism, against inequality for gender identity and sexual orientation, but churches have been mostly silent about women and violence. It's part of our culture, and we accept it in small but insidious ways. So the next time you hear any of these words, think, boys will be boys. Just locker room talk. Did you see what she was wearing? How much did she drink? She led them on. Why didn't she fight them? Stop the words. If you are one who keeps up with social media, you know that it is appalling on Twitter and other places, the rape threats that are made in writing when a woman says something that somebody doesn't like. Stop it. Use your power, your voice. Use your power as a consumer and refuse to support the culture perpetuated in music, movies, television, games, and media that glorifies violence against women. And let's keep telling the stories. Ben read from Luke 13, where Jesus initiates a healing touch. Jesus is offering a healing touch to this woman. He's interested in her. She is unnamed, but for trying to help this woman, Jesus is charged with violating the law. How incredibly ironic. Jesus says, ought not this woman, bound for 18 long years, be set free? Ought not sexual assault and all of the other ways in which women are bound be stopped? Tamar had no agency. She had no choice over what her brother did to her. Yet she bears the burden of Amnon's contempt, which feeds her shame and eventually silences her. I bet you we all know a Tamar. A grandmother, a mother, an aunt, a sister, a friend, a neighbor, or ourselves. Engaging in these stories is not a woman's issue. And if that thought has crossed your mind today, think about that. This is a human issue. The lectionary committee did not have the courage to include stories of violence against women, but the biblical writers did. This may be my first time to have ever preached on Tamar. I hope it's not my last. We must tell the truth as part of bringing awareness to remembering the Tamars who have gone before us, while those who are among us are still living. May God be with us.